Christ is born this day. Hallelujah. Born to drive our night away. Hallelujah. Joy on the mountains, joy in the valleys, joy to the nations, Christ has come. Jesus Christ is born this day. Hallelujah, Christ has come. Born to drive our night away. Hallelujah, Christ has come. Joy in the mountains, joy in the valleys, joy to the nations, Christ has come. Jesus Christ is born this day. Hallelujah. Born to drive our night away. Hallelujah. Joy on the mountains, joy in the valleys, joy to the nations, Christ has come. Joy on the mountains, joy in the valleys, joy to the nations, Christ has come.
This next song, Christmas Mystery, also written by Swami Kriyananda. We'd like to invite the children to come out.
Shepherds came and knelt in wonder there, singing in light beyond compare, and his eyes that told and full love was he, whom men called the Son of Mary. Who tell to me this mystery, how a tiny babe in a manger lay? Could so many hearts to love persuade this holy Son of Mary? Wonderful it was that Christmas day, how from far and near they came to pray, how from far they glimpsed His majesty, whom they called the Son of Mary. Who tell to me this mystery, how a tiny babe
So I'm going to tell the story of when Christ was born. There was Mary and Jesus, and they were a couple, and they had to make this, Mary and Joseph. Not yet. So Mary and Joseph were a couple. Jesus didn't come yet. And they had to travel this long distance to pay taxes. Taxes is money. They had to go to Bethlehem to pay these taxes. And so they were traveling, and they didn't have that much money in the first place, so it wasn't a very happy trip. And also, it was a long trip. It was dusty and bumpy and long. And the biggest problem was Mary was pregnant. She was very, very, very pregnant. So they were traveling, and finally they got to Bethlehem. And in Bethlehem, that's where they had to pay their taxes. So the very first thing, here comes Jesus. So the first thing they did is they paid their money, a big bag of money, and they gave it to the tax collectors, and they just had a little bit of money left. So then it was getting late in the day, and they needed to find a place to stay. So they took their little bit of money, and they went to the first inn. An inn is like a hotel, and they knocked on the door. The person opened it up, and they said, "Do you have a room? We need to stay here the night. Do you have a room?" And this innkeeper said, "There's no room here. There's no room in this inn," and closed the door. So then they went to the next place. They knocked on the door. "Do you have room in your inn?" "No room in this inn." Closed the door. So they went to the next place. They knocked on the door, opened the door, and then instead of asking for a room in the inn, "Do you have any place to stay, anything at all? See, my wife is very, very pregnant, and it's getting dark, and we don't have a place to stay." And the innkeeper said, "Well, there's no room in the inn, but we do have a little barn. It's a stable. It's out back. Is that okay?" And they said, "Okay, yeah, we'll take that." So the innkeeper gave him a candle and said, don't pay me. Just follow that little path and you can stay in the stable." So they went back there. They found this stable. They had their little candle, and they put it down, and they started to rest. They were very tired. Well, there was a legend. A legend is a prophecy. That means people, saints, knew that something special was going to happen. And this legend was that there was going to be a baby born in Bethlehem someday, a great, great soul. And this soul would grow up and bless many, many people and teach many, many people how to feel the love of God, to awaken that love and that joy inside of them. Well, this was the legend. And on that night, in that stable, that great soul was born. His name was Jesus. And so Mary and Joseph were resting in the stable. And meanwhile, somewhere not too far away, there was 3 wise men. And the wise men had heard about this legend too. And they were coming to greet Jesus, to welcome him on this earth. And so they were coming. Mary and Joseph were resting with Jesus. 3 wise men were coming. And then Mary and Joseph were sleeping. And then the angels started coming. Many, many angels. They started circling the stable and going around. And some of them came inside and they lit up the whole stable. Brighter than the candle. Brighter than 1,000 candles. It was a golden glow in the stable, and Mary and Joseph woke up and they looked around. They saw all these angels blessing them. And then a short while later, the 3 wise men came in. They came in, they were dressed in silk robes with jewels, and they all had gold or very expensive gifts. They brought those, and they just quietly walked inside the stable and stood there at the door. And the angels weren't just in the stable. They were also up in the hills. They were flying around up in the hills, and they woke up this little shepherd girl. The shepherd girl, at first she thought it was sunrise because there were so many angels glowing golden in the sky. She thought it was morning time, and then she saw what they were. They were angels floating in the sky. And they were all whispering something. She listened real carefully, and they were saying, "The baby's been born. The baby's been born." She looked at them. And then she she reached over and she started to wake up her daddy, who was the real shepherd. And she woke him up. And by the time he woke up, the angels were gone. They had flown away. They were pretty far away, just a glow in the distance. And she said, "Daddy, there were angels in the sky, and they woke me up, and they said, 'A baby's been born.'" "What's that mean? Daddy, what's that mean?" Well, the daddy, he knew about this legend, this prophecy, and he said, Where is he being born?" And she said, they said in a stable. "Daddy, what's going on?" And he said, "Come with me, we've got to go." And so they ran down the hill, the daddy and the little girl Hannah, and they ran down the hill, and they could see where all the angels were, because they were glowing right around this stable. And they went right up to the stable, and Hannah, she walked up to the door, and she was trying to look in. She was trying to see what was in there, but the 3 wise men were just inside the door, and they were big wise men. They were blocking everything. And she was looking and looking, and finally she just squeezed past them, because she was a little girl. She squeezed past them, and inside the stable, she saw Mary holding the little baby, and Joseph, and she saw all the angels all around. And she just looked. She looked at the baby, and she wanted to see the baby. He was covered up in these little blankets and stuff. And there was Mary holding the baby. And she looked up, and she saw this little girl at the door. And she motioned her to come. She motioned her to sit next to her. And Hannah went right over. And Hannah was looking at the baby. And Mary was showing the baby to her. And little baby Jesus was looking at Hannah, and then something happened. Mary took the baby and gave it to the little girl to hold. And Hannah was holding this little baby, and he was looking up at her, and all of a sudden she felt this love inside of her just start to well up. It wasn't the love for like a mommy or a daddy. It wasn't that kind of a love, and it wasn't the love that she felt for her little baby lambs when they were born. It was something bigger. It just kept coming and coming, and it was more and more of it. It felt like she wanted to just hug the whole world. This big, big hug. And then she felt something else. She started to feel this joy inside of her. And it wasn't a funny kind of a joy. It just made her feel so good. She felt like she was just about to laugh, really laugh and laugh and laugh, but she didn't. She felt like she was right on the edge of a big laugh. So she felt this tremendous love and this big joy inside of her. And from then on, when she left, that love and that joy that she felt in her heart never went away. It kept growing and growing and growing. And she grew up, and she got older, and that love and that joy were always overflowing in her. And whoever she was around, they felt it too. And then those people that were filled with that love and the joy, they passed it on to someone else and someone else, sort of like lighting a candle. And then that candle lights other candles, and those candles light other candles. And that love that Hannah felt in that little stable that night spread and spread and spread. And that's the story of the baby Jesus.
I'll read this week's reading, which is called The Divine Ascension. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 14, we read, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me." What is this I, when spoken by a master who has conquered every vestige of ego consciousness? Therein lies the mystery of true spiritual teachings. That I, that is no I, does it even exist? In what way is it different from the consciousness that animates other human beings? Jesus was not saying, "Look at me, don't look at other masters." He was saying, rather, look at the divine self that is the essence of who you are, your very self. You are that I. No man cometh unto the divine consciousness except by first recognizing his own intrinsic divinity hidden behind his delusive ego. The Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter states, O son of Partha, Arjuna, in whatever way people accept me, in that same way do I appear to them. For all men, in some ways, pursue the path to me. Meditate on the divine incarnations, their lives, and the consciousness animating from them will be your stairway to the infinite. Thus, through the Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Okay. I'll start with, first of all, did we say Merry Christmas? If we didn't, Merry Christmas to you all. And we're so fortunate to have spiritual community to live in. And if we're very fortunate, the power won't go out during the service. So we'll see. So our reading from Whispers is Universal Prayer in the Cosmic Temple. With a myriad of living thoughts of devotion, I have built for thee a temple of awakened silence. I have brought the multicolored lamps of wisdom from all valid faiths. They shine with the luster of thy one truth. The commingled essence of human craving for thy love soars up in spirals from the incense bowl of our hearts. Thy sacred presence shines on altars everywhere. All prayers of all temples, tabernacles, churches, mosques, and viharas are chanting to thee in the universal language of deep love. The orchestra of our combined feelings plays in harmony with the chorus of all soul songs, with the cry of all tears, with the bursting shout of all joys, and with the united anthem of all prayers. In the wall-less cosmic temple of the soul, we worship thee, our one Father. Be pleased to reveal thyself to us always. Amen. Om. Amen. And we're so fortunate, more fortunate than any other gift in life, to have the teachings of our Guru, who really has given us the path to find liberation in God. The beautiful passage from the Bible that we started out the reading with, I am the way and the truth and the life. So often those words have been quoted, so often misunderstood, so often used as kind of a bulwark or something to bludgeon other people who didn't believe the same way they did. But that's not at all what they mean. We can only understand them, as Swamiji says in this reading, if we understand who is this I. I am the way. It is not Jesus the man. It is a universal aspect of consciousness that permeates us. It's who we really are. I had a meditation recently where I was trying so hard to feel God's presence, and this word came into my mind so strongly: accept. Accept that I already am there. It's you who are pushing me away. It's not that I am not there. You just have to accept that reality. And so when we understand the I as our own self, not as something outside of ourselves, not as some religious belief that separates us and makes us better than other people, but it's the I, just as it's said in that beautiful Whispers from Eternity, all human hearts are craving that love. All the tears of all souls ultimately come to that same moment where we say, nothing in this world. How does the beautiful song go? We seek to build gardens in desert sands, but these desert sands will never bear fruit. The desert sands of this world. It's only the inner garden of beauty that brings us the joy we're looking for. And so when we look at these three simple words, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It's a very profound statement, these three words. What does it mean, I am the way? Well, Swami says in this passage that we should meditate on the lives of great incarnations. And if we meditate on the life, because when Christ says, I am the way, he means follow my example in part. He also means practice the teachings that I give you, the path of inner communion, of seeking God's presence in the silence of your own soul, of loving others as God loves them, to have an inward life and then express that life outward to all. But when we look at the life of Christ, it's such a beautiful life. One could think about it over and over again, each little episode, and draw inspiration and meaning. But just as Tim told the beautiful story of the birth of Christ, in humility, in poverty, in simplicity, in great vulnerability. We have to be that way. We have to say, I have no strength, but that comes from you. I have no protection. I have nothing. I am nothing. But still, I am everything. I am magnificent in God's love, in His presence. And the kings, the wise men come and recognize that. Just as the gurus look at each one of us and say, Master said, if you only knew how beautiful you all were, I see you all as beings of light. So in that abject humility and simplicity, to also accept our own divinity. That's what the Christ child represents. And then the life of Christ, His mission. Some years ago, Jyotish and I had the great blessing, along with some other people who are present in this room, of going on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and walking in the footsteps of Christ. And I remember some scenes so vividly. They are impressed in my consciousness that I see them when I close my eyes all the time. And one was at Capernaum on the Sea of Galilee, where Christ drew His disciples to Him. Swami wrote that beautiful song, Lift Your Hearts Unto the Lord. And he said, and it was part of the oratorio, and he wrote the oratorio traveling to all the different places of Christ's life, and he felt the vibration there, and it created the song and the words and the music. And when we stood there on Capernaum, it's just kind of an archaeological ruin really at this point, but beautiful still, on the beautiful Sea of Galilee. And you could feel that joy, you could feel that enthusiasm that these great souls who were the disciples received from their Master. And they knew that it was filled with truth and joy and love, and they wanted to share it with the world. And we need to follow that way too. Feel the power of these teachings, and then don't just say, oh, well, I'm just a guy, I'm just one of those guys, No, none of us are just one of those guys. We are disciples of Christ just as much as they were. And we need to share that with joy and power and love. And then from Capernaum, we walked up this little trail. And maybe it was the same trail that Christ walked on. I don't know. I'd like to think so. And that trail took us up to the mount, a little mountain overlooking the Sea of Galilee. And that's where Christ delivered the Sermon on the Mount. And now it's a beautiful garden. So often in the history of Christianity, where there was a significant moment, they build a big church. And you go in and it's stone and it's ornate and it's totally devoid of any vibration. Or somewhat devoid, I shouldn't say totally. But here, there's no big building. It's just a beautiful garden overlooking this beautiful Sea of Galilee. And there's a little open-air pagoda. And we sang Swami's song, the Beatitudes. And I just want to read them because really they sum up the whole spiritual life, those simple, simple words of the Beatitudes. And it says in Matthew, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain. And when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth, and he taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. And I remember that day when we sang those words, and we stood there on the Mount of Beatitude. And then we went off one by one into this beautiful garden, and we began to meditate alone. And then we heard this kind of undercurrent of noise, kind of like a whispering. And we didn't know what it was exactly. And then we looked around, and there were little groups come from all over the world, spiritual groups with their spiritual teacher or priest or whatever it was. And they were saying, repeating these beautiful words of the Beatitudes, but in many different languages. Chinese and Japanese and Russian and Korean and Spanish and French and German and Italian and on, languages we didn't even know what they were. But we could hear them as this great divine melody being said. And we stopped and we thought, this probably happens every day of every year, that these words of the Beatitudes are being said in the language of the heart of people from all over the world. It never stops. This is the way that goes on and on. And the truth, that truth is the same as we talk about in India, Sanatan Dharma, the eternal truth, the eternal Dharma. And Swami says so beautifully, even if this world were totally destroyed, if there was not a single soul left on this planet, Sanatan Dharma would still exist on the farthest reaches of this universe, because it is the fabric from which all of this creation exists, the truth, the underlying reality that's echoed in these words of Christ. But beyond them, beyond simplicity and humility and mercy and peace and love. It encapsulates all of them, but with power and wisdom and strength. That's the bedrock of this creation. And Christ says, I am the way, and we follow his life. He says, I am the truth. I am a part of every thought that moves in an upward stream towards God. And I am the life. What does this mean? I am the life. Because it's that consciousness that not only sustains us in this body. We know we're all going to have to leave the body sooner or later, one way or another. But just as it says in the poem Samadhi, by deeper, longer, thirsty, guru-given meditation, I am so conscious that, increasingly so, I have to say, because Jyotish and I have gone through a lot in these past months with health issues. There's been stress, there's been fatigue, there's been pain, there's been uncertainty, many things. But there's also been joy. And I knew where that joy came from. And there was the power to sit in meditation no matter what my heart and mind were doing, and just say, God, I could not be doing this without you. And that life that flows through us, that sustains us, that keeps us on the path. No matter how many times we fall flat in our face, that life lifts us up and say, try again. You didn't get it right that time, but you'll get it right the next time. You'll do better next time. Come on, let's go. That's the life that sustains us. And if we want to meditate on the lives of these avatars, we need to be channels for that. We need to let that life, that light, that truth and joy and love flow through us. And don't shrink from it. Don't say, oh, I made a mistake. How can I be that? How can I be good? How can I help another person? It has nothing to do with us. It's the I of who we really are. And nothing diminishes that. Nothing compromises that. And the more we own that and accept it in humility, in simplicity, in vulnerability, but still that I moves forward. And then we become channels of that. And that really, to become channels of the light and to merge in that light, there's no other reason that we've come to earth but that. And the more we can each day, yes, there are things to do, there are places to go, people to see, all those things, but that has nothing to do with it. It's living in the spirit of Christ and always remembering thou and I, never apart. And I want to just close with, we got a very sweet Christmas card from Sumitra, and in it she copied a portion of a letter from Master. This was an excerpt from a letter written by Master December 1951, so his last Christmas. And this is what he says. But let us remember that the greatest way in which we can pay homage to the Christ is not merely by gift giving, but by emulating his spirit, giving gifts of friendship and love, understanding and help to those who need and want it. It is this spirit of Christ which alone can dissolve all differences of men and bring about real unity and brotherhood under the one fatherhood of God. Let us each live in such a way that we can say we have added some fuel of friendship to the life-giving flame of universal understanding. Universal understanding, the Christ consciousness, our own higher self. In this wonderful community in which we live, let us help each other and help the world to awaken just as the Christ child awakened on that day and changed hearts forever, let us also awaken and be vehicles for passing on that light so that it never dies in this world of shadow, but the light shines always, and we know we are that light.
Lift your hearts up to the Lord.
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Spread the news that He is joy.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing. Hallelujah, God is joy.
Lift your hearts up to the Lord.
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Spread the news that He is true.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing. Hallelujah, God is true. Lift your hearts up to the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Spread the news that He is love. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing. Hallelujah, God is love. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing. Hallelujah, God is love. We dreamed of it.